Well, happy, beautiful, amazing day. Happy, beautiful 2026. Dr. Bob Rakowski here with one of my new friends, Art Aviles. As he says, nothing more, nothing less. He's an author, he's an influencer, he's a health practitioner, and he has created his 7 factors, 7 C's of longevity. And Art, I'm tremendously excited to talk to you about that because let's face it, I think what you share is what our wonderful world really needs.
Absolutely. And, it's been a long road for me as I'm one of the victims of chronic inflammation in the past. I thought I had it all, that I figured it all out. Being in the fitness industry for about 30 years, I thought I had it all, perfect structure, a great roadmap. And then, boom, hit a brick wall and I had to refigure it out. Definitely has been
Well,
a
let's go with that brick wall. I mean, tell me your life was cooking along. What happened? What wall did you hit? And then what was your steps to ultimately solve it?
well, I'll start from scratch here. As a kid growing up in Southern California, I was in athletics all my life, high school through college. I, studied kinesiology, opened up a successful fitness practice. And, I've been in the industry for 30 years, whether it's fitness, nutrition. And then, obviously, about my mid 40s, this is when I started experiencing lots of inflammation. I couldn't figure it out. Like I said, I had it figured out before, but then until I didn't, and I had to reconnect. I had to reconnect with myself. I went into, I've always had, the fascination about Ayurveda, which is an Indian medicine, and also world medicines like Latin America, where my parents are from. So I had that fascination of learning about it, but I never really took it upon, you know, myself to use it for my own practice until I had to, right? So that's where I experienced the herbal medicines that have helped and stepping out of the zone of just going with biohacks and really seeing how it works in these long life communities, and that's been my experience. That's how I created these 7 C's, going out to the Mediterranean, some of these indigenous regions of Latin America. It taught me a lot, and I've brought it back home and started utilizing it and sharing it with people. So that's where we're at.
Well, interesting enough, you shared one of your C's right there with connection, connecting with community, connecting with the earth. You said you're connecting with yourself, but our 7 C's, calm, connection, community, you got two movements: cardiovascular movement, cargo movement, moving objects, culinary arts, and curiosity. Of those seven, where do you want to start?
We'll start with calm, okay? Because that was one of the things that really helped me. I Once I hit 52, I'm 57 right now. So once I hit 52, another brick wall hit me, and I ended up with atrial fibrillation,
Mm.
right? AFib. And that's one of the things I couldn't figure out. Uh, so I had to really slow down. It wasn't about just taking more vitamins or minerals and exercising more. If anything, I had to slow it down. And here in America, we're used to fast pace, trying to keep up. And I really had to figure out what I could do to reconnect with the earth, but at the same time, disconnect with things that were overstimulating my nervous system. And that's what I did. I mean, I started working on calm practices. And we hear, we're used to hearing about meditation, mindfulness practices, prayer. You have your traditional disconnects like siestas, which I love. And so not only that, but I started noticing from these, you know, uh, visiting these Mediterranean towns where people just slow down, completely just slow down. And for them, it's they're not about, oh, I'm going to meditate. They don't think of that. They're just slowing down everything when they're out there, even when they're working, either they're picking up wood or whatever. They're really taking their time smelling the roses, right? Smelling the roses, the air, touching the earth, and they're just take I know it's not a good practice here in America, but they take their time when you're doing something, and it's just that calmness, and once I started practicing that, it really helped me, uh, reconnect with Earth, and I had to do other things like disconnect with, all the environmental toxins that we have, which we can't see, but they're there. Where there's the Wi-Fi, the 5G, our smart meters at home, stuff like that. I had to really restructure to help me reduce all those palpitations, and I was successsul. No more aphid, knock on wood, for the last 4 years.
Well, your number 2 is connect, interestingly enough, but within the connect, you also said disconnect. So maybe expand on that a little bit, because I think
So
we all need to, no doubt we need both, right? We need to
right,
disconnect and reconnect.
right. So the connection, as we practice, connecting with the sun, barefoot, all that stuff, it seems to be working very well. I noticed in social media, a lot of people are jumping on that, and a lot of great experiences have been happening with reducing inflammation, but the disconnect would be again, I just touched on it, and that would be, finding ways in your home because it's one of believe it or not, in our homes is one of the most toxic areas that we tend to be in the most, and it's from all these like the Wi-Fis and the 5Gs, the blue light, the LEDs, you name it. There's something we have to do here with the blue light, just disconnect, having a structure where at night, okay, it's not going to be blue light, it's going to be red light. Uh, Going ahead and turning off the Wi-Fi, going with the landline, connecting with the landline instead of the Wi-Fi. Things you could do to disconnect. Another thing is when you ground, you're actually disconnecting or discharging, right? We have a lot of friction going on when we're energized. And with the with the earthing or grounding, you're actually discharging all this energy, this inflammation that happens with the body. I mean, I know a lot of people that what I talk to them and they're like, "Oh, I haven't touched the ground for like 30 days." Oh my God, I can't believe it. Or I see other people I'm here near the beach, they're walking on the sand with their sneakers on. So I'm like, take those shoes off. It's not permitted here. Take them off, discharge. Okay. And you'll notice the difference. So those are one of the things of disconnecting or discharging to, get yourself back into balance.
Yeah, one thing I like to tell people, certainly barefoot is best, but you can also get bare hands. Get your hands in the dirt to do a little
That's
garden.
right.
That'll be another way of, and literally when you talk about discharging, I mean, the Mother Earth gives us so much good, and there's a source of electrons, which are the movement of electrons is life, and we get that from Mother Earth. So your third C, as I have it listed, is community support. And heck, sometimes I think that ought to be number one because let's
It
face it, they're
does.
social animals. But what have you found out, especially in your travels to the world, about the importance of community, and how can we get it back?
Yeah, that's my number 3, and that's one of the things that stood out the most as, especially in Mediterranean areas where people really come together when either it's dinner, lunches, uh, they seem to be with, of course, the right people, right? Because I mean, we know about the low frequency people, high frequency people. We talk about it a lot. So they tend to have that right community, and it doesn't have to be hundreds of people. It could be 2 to 3, 4 people that you're constantly with, and it just brings that energy that fills the body with, let's just say, uh, like I said, I like to say high frequencies, but there's also love in there, right? There's comfort, there's that caring that you feel with the community. You can't, I mean, it's just something you can't replace. I know a lot of people like to talk about, oh, I like to be at peace. I like to be alone, withdraw from the world. But you know what? It comes down to being part of the world, participating without letting it control you, of course. And that's the key. There's ways to do it.
You talk about the ancient healing systems like Ayurvedic medicine and Chinese medicine. In energy systems, you can add energy or you can subtract energy. It's a lot easier to subtract energy than add energy. So everybody we're around, there's the potentials. They say there's two
Right.
types of people. Someone walks in the room gets brighter. You want that to be you. Someone, the room gets brighter when you leave. You don't want that to be you. So
You don't.
fun stuff there. So you broke movement into two categories, cardiovascular and cargo. So let's talk about movement because hey, life is motion.
Yeah,
What
put
did you
them right.
find out about these cultures? How do they go about moving, and what do you recommend for us?
Yeah, and I recently put them together, because I did see how they actually do cardio, you know, with walking constantly, but they're often walking carrying something. So I like to now put those 2 together, call it cardiovascular loaded movement. Because I mean, every day, they're outdoor, they're moving with something gripping, they're actually gripping something. Uh, Here we see people now using those vested, those weighted vests, which helps to be loaded, right, when they're out there. But yeah, that's one of the things I noticed the most, consistently just moving, going either to church, walking, to the market, walking, to wherever they go, it's a walk, right? I know I was counting my walks, my steps, when I was there just recently, a few months ago, and we were averaging, my wife and I, we were averaging 25,000 steps every day. And, of course, you feel it since we're not used to it. But there, I mean, you just following the same path everybody does. And you're walking everywhere. And the carrying part, that's what I've noticed more. I mean, I'm talking 99, 95-year-old people just carrying, small logs or, jugs, whatever it is, they're carrying. And you don't see gyms everywhere in every corner. Yes, I'm sure people go to gyms, but they're not focusing on working out. They're focusing on movement and movement. Yes, there's people at the parks are doing some functional patterns, functional movements with weights outdoors. That's what I've noticed the most, and I really love that concept. So I've applied it to uh to my workouts.
I think the global average for steps is less than 6,000 per day. So think about that. You did 400% more. There's a certain minimum. I think they recommend to just be happy. You need about 6,000 steps. I always thought about Europe. I went to dinner with some friends and one night they said, "Yeah, it's a nice little 45-minute walk." Well, where in the world do we ever walk 40, when do we ever walk 45 minutes here? We just don't. And then I think about these other countries, Africa, I'd see these people walking with 2, 3, 4 feet of stuff balanced on their head. So
Amazing.
I've seen that I'm thinking of places like Haiti, I've seen that. Pretty amazing. Did you in any of your travels see people balancing huge loads on their head and
I have not, and that's
okay.
one of the places I haven't gone to, which is the African, continent. I would love to go, but I have not seen that. I've seen it on video, but it's amazing. I think
I
it's
would think
scary.
that, we'd have to force our posture to be really quite good
Absolutely.
before we get into the culinary arts. I'm going to go to our sponsor, bettercoffeeshop.com, the world's cleanest reishi infused organic coffee, won the award the best organic coffee in the world 2 years in a row, bettercoffeeshop.com. So let's talk about the culinary arts. What are you looking for here? And you know, I, I wonder if culinary is an art here in the US. I certainly see it a lot more in other parts of the world. What's your intake on that?
Yeah, when I talk about culinary art, it's really more talking about homemade cooking, with love, not necessarily being a licensed, chef or anything like that. But it's a practice of caring, not just for yourself, but for your loved ones, whoever you're cooking for at home. And that's part of those long living cultures, right? Where they prepare the meals, they take it slow and easy, and it's intentional at home. And I really love that. And it's part of my culture too. With my parents coming from Mexico, it's pretty much a ritual. They're in there, they're chopping away, they're stirring, they're tasting, they're laughing, they're everyone's talking around the kitchen, and and then once you sit down, it's obviously a conversation, taking our time while we're, masticating, chewing, and drinking and all that stuff. So that's what I that's how I describe culinary art. It is an art in itself, right? And I had to sneak my name in there too, art.
Ah, we start looking at that, and one of my mentors said years ago, "People cook only for the sake of eating. Why not cook for the sake of enjoying it, for creating art, for sharing the art?" And I think that's
Well
something
said.
that most of the world, so much of culture has focused around that. How do we get back to that here? I don't know very many families that consistently have a meal together. Do you?
Yeah, not very many, but it's a practice. I mean, now my wife and I are empty nesters now, so it's a practice. It's easy practice for us. We're together most of the time. But yeah, with the kids as they grow up, there's we have the kids in sports. They're doing something constantly. Times are different. Schedules are different with some people that work graveyard, others at night. It's very hard to do here, but I think if you know, practice that from the beginning of building that family when whatever age you're at, say you're in your 20s, and maybe you build something around that so that you can make sure at least one meal you're sitting with family, at least one day a week you're going to your parents or your cousins or even friends and sitting down together at least once a week. We don't have to do this daily, but if we could do something like that once a week, friends, family, whoever, sit down and enjoy a meal and a conversation. Great conversations happen at the kitchen table.
Well, and that might lead into our seventh C, curiosity. Uh,
Curiosity.
do you think I'm thinking about that. I mean, families need to be more curious about each other. I don't go to restaurants that much anymore because I really like the home cooking. I like the culinary arts, but too often you see people on a phone, even though they got people right at the table with them. So, you know, curiosity, where does that come in, and how do we get more of it? How do we share more of it?
Yeah. So yeah, it's nature and imagination. It's part of being creative, which leads to intuition. And you know, curiosity. Well, culinary art fits right into it, right? Being creative and curious about, these foods, what can I cook today? And but it just, when you're curious, it's gonna bring clarity, right, into the game here. You're gonna create uh less stress because of these, uncertainties. When you're not curious, you're just going with the flow, and it also builds courage. So I like curiosity because it's gonna just pretty much keep the brain going, creates adaptive resilience. Uh, it's more than it's more than just discipline because I see with the long living cultures, they don't try to control life. They just, they engage with it, and that's being curious, right? Being curious. So that's what I love about having that curiosity in there. Keeps us young.
I think someone asked Einstein, how did you learn so much? He said, "Look, I don't think I have any special mental gifts. I'm just insanely curious."
Right.
And I believe that was also Da Vinci, who they considered the greatest genius of all time. His
Leonardo.
top mental strategy was curiosity. So, of those 7, do you have a daily routine? Yeah, is there a simple way where you could go boom, boom, boom? Here's how you get these 7 in. And if so, what would that be?
Yeah, so I love the 7 since it fits into 7 days. So even if you could just do 1 a day in the 7 days, you could check it off. So I like to have, like, I track it with, like, a checklist and on the kitchen, refrigerator, and if I could do at least 1 a day, that's great. Now, number 1, the calm, I have to do daily because I don't wanna fall into that atrial fibrillation again. So that one's daily. So not all 7 are gonna fit in the day-to-day, task, but, if you could do some of them daily, and then you could do, like, for example, the culinary art once a week, you check that off within those 7 days, that's already a great start to, just adapting. Because my focus is longevity, and I've studied longevity, and that's what I've noticed. I love how I put it all together. I've even added, like I said, I kinda put the cardiovascular, which is walking and gardening and all that, with the loaded movement, which was cargo. I put it together so I could sneak in another one in there and that would be to make sure that we are staying in our circadian alignment. So that's one thing I wanted to make sure we implemented in there because it also has helped me.
All right, so explain that. Right, circadian, like circle. Bodies have a rhythm. 24 hours, that could be one rhythm for ladies. A month could be another rhythm. For a lot of us, there's a seasonal rhythm, then there could be a annual rhythm. So tell us about the rhythms and how to get in sync with our circadian clock.
Right. So again, yes, like you said, it's a, alignment. It's a natural cycle. So our hormones, our metabolism, our immune system function optimally when you're in sync with your, let's just say, your latitude, right? So again, long live cultures, they don't overcomplicate it. They just, they rise with the sun. They're gonna rest within sets. They eat in tune during the day, not too late at night, and they honor the seasons, like you were saying, the seasonal. They honor the seasonal rhythms and with the food they eat, with work, right, and even workouts. So everything they're staying aligned with it, like hibernating like the bears, when it's time to hibernate. So that's one of the reasons I like to make sure. Again, we'll go back to that, making sure I'm disconnecting with the artificial lighting, making sure that I'm turning off the cell phone at a certain time. All that stuff helps me stay within my circadian rhythms, right?
Now, you mentioned the term a couple times, biohacks. Do you have some favorite biohacks?
I do have biohacks, absolutely. Of course, the red light therapy, uh, photobiomodulation is what I love to do. Now, my wife does it in the daytime when she wakes up. I like to do it at night. She says she can't do it at night because she can't sleep well. Seems to give her some energy. To me, it just puts me to sleep. So I love doing that at night. So it just depends on what you like. Another thing I like doing is the sauna. I know you're a big proponent of that. The sauna really works for me. And again, I tell people when they ask me how long, well, just you got to feel it. Depends on how you feel, what works best for you. For me, it's like 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 4 times a week. And I just feel great with it. If I go a little bit over, then I start, feeling like I'm stressing. So we don't want to bring the stress back in, right? When we're trying to reduce it. So those are two great biohacks I like. Of course, there's many more, but those are the two that stand out.
Well, even you mentioned earthing. Some call that a biohack.
Exactly. That's a free bio.
Sunlight, first morning light could easily be a biohack. Putting a
Absolutely.
weighted vest on, no, that's exercise, but that could be a biohack as well,
Right.
interestingly enough.
Right.
So,
Yeah, so
so
you come up with biohacks. I'm always thinking of tech, right? That's what's the technology out there with the biohack technology. But yeah, you're right. Sunlight, getting out there, grounding early. And then we mentioned the hands. If it's winter, it's cold. How am I going to get my feet out there in the snow or, it's too cold? Use your hands, right? There's also some grounding tools that you could use indoors from like companies like earthing.com, so there's ways to do it, even in the winter.
well, when you're creative, you can certainly get it done. And then while you mentioned winter, what about cold? Do you do anything with cold? Do you recommend cold plunges, anything like that?
Cold plunges, yes, cold plunges, of course. And you know what? Let's go back to the '90s when I was a fitness instructor. There was these gyms, kind of like the 24-hour fitness. It was a different name back then. There was a Bally's. They had right next to each other. They had the cold plunge, and then they had the jacuzzi right
Yep.
next to each other. So it was something we used to do. I know it's now the new trend, but it's been around for what, the hundreds, thousands of years. People have used it, and yeah, it's a great therapy, great way to shock the system, and it builds that resilience for the immune system.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, anything that demands more of our body to adapt, whether it's hot, whether it's cold, a different form of exercise, we even adapt to different diets.
Right.
So now what's in your future? What do you see yourself doing over the next 5 to 10 years and making our wonderful world better?
Well, we're going to continue on. I am in the process of creating or writing another book, and it's going to do with longevity, uh I do have a couple of I mentioned herbal products, so some herbal supplementation I'm going to bring into the mix. I like to formulate things that seem to work for me, and so I'm going to be introducing some of the herbal formulas like oregano oil from the indigenous regions of Mexico, and you know, putting them together with olive oil, for example, things like that. I'm getting into, and it's not going to be something big. It's going to be, let's just say, I have a batch of 100 that I put together. Here they are. Try them out because I think it's getting kind of wild and crazy out there with supplements. One minute you have this great company producing a supplement, all of a sudden it's sold out to somebody else that just changed the whole formula, and it's like, Art, you recommended this. I'm like, I know, but it was before before it changed. So that's one thing I love to help the community with because it's so confusing out there with supplementation. That's one thing. And then putting it all together in a book, a guide that helps. Here's what you can do at home with supplements, or, bringing some herbs to your home and do it yourself.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to encourage everybody to be diligent that way. That's part of what I do. I teach health and nutrition. And in the last handful of years, Big Pharma has spent more than 20 billion with a B buying up small, intermediate, in some cases, large nutrition companies. And like you
Sure.
said, they're changing the formula. So I might ask this, if you make a lot of money off of drugs, do you want people getting good nutrition? I'll let people answer that for themselves because,
Right.
hey, let's face it, the healthiest people, they don't take drugs. So it might
Exactly.
be in pharma's interest to keep people sick. Art, what's the best way for people to reach you?
Well, you could find me at on Instagram, which is Bio1Art, right? Bio1Art. And also, I do have a website called bio1method.life where I share all this information of longevity. And one of my books is on Amazon. It's called Age with Intention. So you could also find my book there.
Well, I like that, right? We want to age with intention. We want to be around as long as we possibly can and
Right.
enjoy every magic moment as much as we can. Art, the time has gone fast. It's been beautiful.
It
Any
has.
words to wrap up for our wonderful listening audience?
Well, one thing I'll say is quickly is, live with accordance to nature. I don't mean going into the woods, but, do what you can to align yourself with actions that take you into your natural environment wherever you live. That's one of the things I tell people, and then do things in moderation. You don't have to go all, crazy with optimization, but do it in moderation, self control, and slow down.
I think that's some of the best advice that's ever been given. And as always, I'm Dr. Bob Rakowski, absolutely knowing that we can all be happy, healthy, and successful. So enjoy this wonderful episode, share it with your friends, be healthy, be happy.